So just thank you all for coming, and thank you to the Twilio team for sponsoring the speaking event. So appreciate it. And for those of you kind of listening remotely, we hope you guys find the session to be valuable and helpful. My name is Nira Vias. I'm the head of MarTech, AdTech, and customer experiences for all things data and AI at Capgemini. Kind of a long career, kind of sitting in innovation consulting, as well as leading AI ML teams across a number of different organizations, including at Amazon, both at AWS and Amazon Ads. And I learned earlier today that Srini is also an ex-Amazonian. And I'm here with Srini.
Yeah. Thank you, Nirav, and thanks everybody for taking the time today to come here and join this talk. I'm Srinivas. I go by Srini as well. I'm a head of data and AI at StockX. For those of you who may not know about StockX, I'll share a little bit about StockX. So we are a online marketplace and that connects buyers and sellers in a global marketplace. And we take a stock market ethos with price transparency and trust. So we initially take the bid and ask model and connect the buyers and sellers. So we are a Detroit-based company, but we have global operations in North America, Europe, and Asia. And a fun fact is, we have about 12 billion product page views a year. So we have a lot of data, a lot of global commerce going through that stuff. And obviously tariffs is making it increasingly complex, which is one of the things we deal with every day. And if you are checking out your next sneakers, apparel, electronics, collectibles, check out stockx.com or go to our app or iOS or Android app. Okay. Just professionally, I've been at StockX for 5 years. Prior to that, I was in Amazon and Nordstrom and telecom. So it's been data by my whole career, and I'm excited to be here today.
So Srini, just with that, right? Yeah. Given the volume of data that you guys are dealing with, how are you thinking about AI initiatives in a way that drive value and kind of help accelerate innovation?
Yeah. Oh, great. It's kind of funny because when we I looked at the StockX, it was one of the things that struck me well was that innovation was really what drove me to StockX. We really trying to solve what's the real world problems for buyers and sellers at StockX. So that's kind of what drove me to there. And the first thing I will call out here is that we recently started working on a reseller marketplace. And in that marketplace, what we realized is that we can do a lot of organic traffic. But what we needed really was ability for sellers to do listings and do sponsored listing program. So we launched that program, and the goal was to drive more organic traffic to our website and then drive recommendations and search for our website. So it's all an AI/ML driven program for us. The other thing is I want to call out is that data is really key for us. Having trusted data sets is a huge thing from a data perspective, from a AI/ML perspective. So that's where we spend a lot of time. That's where we leverage Segment for to build that strong foundation to drive our AI/ML models.
I think it's a really important point, right? Because we jump to talking about innovation use cases, and we don't always think about that initial kind of data quality and data foundations coming through. For those of you who haven't seen it, Segment's got a really interesting data maturity kind of model framework that they put out that helps you to kind of assess kind of your maturity across a different spectrum and kind of help gauge yourself against other peers. But we also think about that as how do you make it easier to have better data up front? How do we take some of that burden off and do that in a way that our engineering teams don't have to worry about that? We can do it with confidence, right? And trust that it'll be there so that we can focus more on the downstream applications of where we have differentiation, right? So be able to build those machine learning models, drive that customization, orchestrate journeys and more personalized experiences rather than worrying so much about just the plumbing in and of itself. And so it's a place where we not only think about leveraging Segment for our customers and clients and recommending them, right? But also thinking about how do you then use what Segment is doing to kind of unify and make the data better, but also then augment that with the investment that you're making in Databricks and then being able to use Databricks as your foundational platform for operational and for operational data as well as analytical data. So Srini, kind of touching on like the data quality piece that
Yeah,
you were mentioning, right?
yeah.
How do you think about that relationship between data readiness and like the success of AI programs and
Yeah.
kind of some of the more kind of data volumes and real-time data that you guys are dealing with?
Yeah. So, I was talking about the ad program that we were running, the sponsored listing program. Clickstream data is the huge driver for all of that, right? So, and then we also need that in real time. So before, we used to have, Google Analytics and Segment as two data sources for us for Clickstream data. And we realized that if you really want to accelerate our AI programs, we need a single source of truth for our Clickstream data, right? And it has to be real time because we have to power search, recommendations, ads, and a lot of other use cases that we had. So we kind of, because, the answer was for us very obvious because we needed a real time capability. So we needed a collection capability that can not only collect the data in real time, but also process the data in real time for us, right? So that's where we chose Segment for that. The second thing that really attracted to us was we also needed to do data quality, data governance of those events in real time, right? Because we have data coming across our web and apps, and we need to make sure that they're all clean data sets. So we leverage the tracking plan in Segment to kind of have the real-time data quality capabilities, right? And that really kind of accelerated a lot of our, not just the advertisement use case that I was talking about before, but also, just recently we launched, with a new, with Trade Desk, our new advertisement partner, so that people can use StockX audiences for targeting, right? So just we want to empower our sellers more and more capability so that they can reach out to what they think is the right targeted audience for their customers, right? For their products. So that's kind of where we see a lot of value leveraging Segment for us.
Yeah, and we see a couple major trends, like kind of building on what Srini's been talking about in terms of kind of real-time event collection and kind of modernizing that framework out for most organizations. So a lot of marketing teams and organizations chose to kind of disintermediate their marketing analytics data to a Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics, and that did an okay job, right, for marketing alone, right? But with changes in the privacy landscape, GA increasingly has challenges as serving as the single source of truth. It's not your single source of truth. It's not going to be accurate right across all of your customer journeys for people who are using iOS devices, right? Safari, right? Firefox, etc. So that becomes one piece of the puzzle where GA itself can't meet those needs. The second piece is that organizations did not prep and plan for being able to collect that clickstream data to start doing omni-channel journeys and omni-channel journey orchestration. Because it's not that clickstream and my web analytics is just for my marketing team and for those experiences or just for my e-com team. I need to bring all that data together and I need to be able to stitch it and I need to be able to act on it in real time, especially if you're an e-commerce retailer or you're running an ads business, right? And so as part of that, a lot of organizations have this conversation on build versus buy. And I tend to kind of focus on helping people kind of think through build versus buy as focus your activities on the places where you have differentiation. Where you're conducting activity that is undifferentiated heavy lifting, the conversation for me is always, why are you doing that? Right. So can you do real-time event collection with native services and Databricks? The answer is yes. You can do it on almost every single cloud platform. Do you want to maintain all that plumbing, the reporting, the data quality, the data governance associated with that, right? And you want to spend several sprints, if not several months, getting all that up and running and having that at high fidelity? Or would you rather be focusing on the other parts of your analytics business that drive a ton of value rather than just building a pipe that's dumping a ton of water, right? And so that, again, becomes a conversation for us on like thinking about where do certain parts of the MarTech stack take some of that lift away from you and reduce the engineering burden and accelerate the value that engineering teams as well as business teams will get from that data itself, right? And the last other piece I'll say is that, like, because a lot of marketing technologies come in and say things, there's a difference between actually being real time and pretending to be real time. And I'm just gonna put it at that. Like Srini runs a very large organization. I ran a mobile app company. I was at Amazon Ads. We have large customers, right? They're doing hundreds, billions of events per day. And some of those events, especially if you're running an ads business, have sub-millisecond requirements. Segment works at scale for our clients at that place. Right? We cannot say that about almost every other marketing cloud and marketing technology out there, right? And so not only from the collection perspective, but also to be able to orchestrate on that to do personalization, et cetera, right? That I think is a huge differentiator.
I'll just also click on one other thing, which is the identity resolution.
Yeah.
For us, that was a huge value add because we need to understand the experiences across our web and app. So and also, anonymous and logged in users, right? Because it's a lot of times it happens is that just come in, do a bunch of activity, then they log in and do some ordering, bidding, ask, right? So this is where Segment really drives value for us, to be able to do that automated stitching of the user identity across, the multiple sessions, across web and apps, and in real time, which allows us then to do all these services for us.
Yeah, I think it's an important point, right? Because we're at a point now in the market where Google may make different decisions, but over 55% of the market doesn't have third-party cookies in there.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because many times for marketing teams and CX teams, they make an analytics decision, right, to hold that journey data for 7 days or 30 days, right? But in reality, I can maintain the persistency of a cookie for unknown to known users up to 2 years, right? And so the question ends up becoming, like, you have some decision that's made over here, but people aren't thinking about the future to say, I actually want to understand the holistic nature of the journey. And if I'm cutting the data off at 7 days or 30 days, how do I actually understand what the actual time to a journey was and what's that fragmentation? How do I use that for recommendations? From an experience orchestration perspective, your business teams may want to make decisions where you don't want to force someone to log in, but I want to understand who that person is. So I'm going to send them an email and get them to land on the website or on my mobile app, or I'm going to send an SMS text. Those are ways where we can actually authenticate and understand the person without forcing them to log in. But if you haven't thought about identity resolution and stitching on a journey that's going to potentially last 2 years, or be able to link that together, right? Then you're already kneecapping your personalization efforts and your experience efforts. And then if you think about that as now the change that many organizations are going for where they collected data for 7 days or 30 days, and now you're connecting up to 2 years worth of data on people, right? You're easily getting to hundreds of millions, billions of events coming through. And so you need a way to effectively be able to connect that data together, right? Which is where I think Segment helps. And then you need a way to effectively process that data, right? Which is a place where I think Databricks excels at.
Yep, great.
So Srini, where's kind of an area where you kind of think about like that raw data collection side of the house, right? And then how it kind of drove a ton of business value for you guys?
Yeah. So for us, when you look at our CRM campaigns, CRM programs, increasingly what we're realizing is we need data from pretty much everywhere, right? It's not just about clickstream data. We want the customer service data. We want all the transaction data. We want supply chain data from an e-commerce perspective, right? So what is increasingly become important for us is really be able to target from the data where it exists, rather than trying to bring it all into one tool, like into Segment for CRM, into some other tool. We use multiple tools for other marketing campaigns, right? So what we really realize is that with we used to use the reverse ETL, which is another capability of Segment, to really pipe in the data, and that was great, but still we had to move the data. There's multiple copies of the data that exist there, and we have to figure out and orchestrate and do a pipeline for that. But what we are really excited about, and we just tried working on this one, is that like the linked audiences feature that just got launched by Segment, which really now I don't even need to move the data, zero copy. I can just point that to Segment to my Databricks data platform and literally use every data that is available out there and create segments. Which means, what it means for me is I don't have to deal with the marketing tech team to say, hey, Srini, we need all this data piped into Segment. We need a reverse ETL job to move this data into Segment, right? They can do it without really having any data engineering or any really engineering efforts on that side of it. So that's been a huge unlock for us, right? For me, that's, when I look at Segment journey in the last 2-3 years, it's been significantly, improving, and I really appreciate how this has been a feedback that we've been having a long time with Segment. Like, hey, I don't want to be just tied to Segment and Segment data only, and this is really a powerful unlock for us.
Yeah, and I think I'll double down on like composability, right? Because the trend in the marketplace is increasingly to be able to leverage the investments in my cloud platforms to drive personalization, to drive customer experiences, to do journey orchestration. And to be able to do that, right, with a platform that scales, right, and leverage your investments in Databricks, right, I think is incredibly helpful. Like we think of Segment as one of the most composable CDPs in the market out there, and definitely the most composable one, right, from kind of a security regulatory perspective. But I'll also add in, right, that when we think about it, like, and we think about the larger marketing and CX domain, right, the ability to do that and leverage your data within Databricks is significantly different compared to other marketing clouds like Adobe or Salesforce. And when we're seeing organizations have tons and tons of net new cost coming into some of those platforms, right, being able to have a composable solution that works really well at scale, but also talks to those platforms. So to Srini's point, like Segment is not intending to be everything in and of itself, right? But it becomes an incredibly powerful orchestrator, right, across different points in the ecosystem. So you may use Braze for email campaigns. You may use Adobe Target for A/B testing, right? Being able to have that data unified, stitched together, having all the journeys in place, and use all the data that's sitting within your data lake, that's, in my mind, really game changing. And as we start moving to more advanced use cases, on agentic, generative AI, et cetera, right? That problem of not having the data consolidated in one place is only begin to magnify, right? Because it doesn't matter how fast or brilliant I can make an agent. If that agent is only orchestrating on a limited subset of your data, then the intelligence and actions it's going to be able to take are always going to be limited by the fragmentation that it had, right? Salesforce only has the data that Salesforce has. SAP only has the data that SAP has. Adobe only has the data that Adobe has, right? But you want consistent experiences for customers across all of the journeys. Because otherwise what you end up actually having is not data silos, but AI silos. And so you have a bunch of AI models or agents that make recommendations or decisions without the context of the entirety of that data, and it actually creates a disjointed experience. And now if you think about doing that at scale, right, you're actually accelerating the ability to provide bad experiences.
Yeah. No, 100%. It's kind of interesting for us, even when you talk about Gen AI, and like, when you look at LLM models, and increasingly it's becoming very apparent that LLM models need to understand the corporate data, need to understand the enterprise data, to be able to and fine tune the model so that we can prevent a lot of hallucinations out there, and also build trust in the solutions that we're building on top of that, right? So that was like, to going back to the single source of truth. It would have been chaotic if we had multiple clickstream data sources for an LLM to consume, right? So that's where like having all that single source of truth accelerate the Gen AI efforts that we are having as well. Like, having the agent can rely on one data source and drive the experiences is really powerful.
So I know you can't say direct things that you're doing, right, or thinking about doing in the future, but can you talk a little bit about like trends you're thinking about over the next 4 years, and like AI initiatives your teams are going to be thinking about, how that fits in with the market?
I think there are a couple of things I wanted to call out. One is more near, like 1 year roadmap, I should say, for us, which is like multimodal, right? Like multimodal search, multimodal experiences. What I mean by multimodal is, hey, I want to have a conversational search, I want to have an image-based search, I want to have a video search. A lot of it being powered by LLMs, obviously, but also leveraging our existing search capabilities as well, right? So that's a huge thing. But we also want to do it in a fashion that can leverage our market data, market statistics data, right? So that's one huge thing. And the other trend that we are seeing is the concept of whole shopping assistant. Which you saw this with OpenAI Operator. You've probably seen a little bit of that glimpse with Amazon Alexa Plus, and we see that ecosystem even growing bigger in the next few years. So that's definitely another focus area for us, is to build that the virtual assistant, shopping assistant functionality, and because we feel that is an increasingly the agentic way of doing shopping, right? And increasingly becoming a more of a personalized shopping experience that people don't even have to potentially even visit our website. But that's kind of the way, that's the world we're looking at. And also being able to be there in the customers wherever they are. They may choose to be in Amazon, but we want to partner with them. They may choose with the OpenAI. We want to be having a partner with everybody out there as well, right? So those are really the two big areas for us. There is a lot of other things that are there, but in the context of e-commerce, these are really the big trends that we see. CS and there are other use cases, but really these are the two things that stand out from my perspective. Yeah.
And I'll kind of add on building on kind of like an agentic first or agentic forward world, right? One of the interesting things, like Srini and I were talking about this before, right? We see a world where agents are going to have an increasingly role in all of the ways we interact. Many of you guys are probably already using Gemini or ChatGPT, et cetera, right? But as we think about like a multi-agentic workforce and like the way that folks are going to work in the future, right? I'm going to need agents to take multiple decisions, which means they're going to need to have access to wider corpus of data. And then on top of that, they then need to orchestrate that into a downstream system. So send an email, send an SMS text, restructure their journey, right? And so from an experience perspective, like the surface area that you're looking at, right, for agents to interact with consumers is going to get larger and larger and larger. And that also means that the connection points into the ecosystem that you need to maintain are get larger and larger and larger. So today I need a connection to Braze and Adobe and Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Tomorrow I need it to Perplexity, maybe to a direct service that Cohere or OpenAI begins to launch, right? And when we do those interactions, the data that we're going to send to agents will likely look very different than the data that we send, right, to Braze or Salesforce. Yeah. Right. And so that becomes a really interesting dynamic, right, that we're going to have to deal with. Right. And so that's, again, an area where I kind of look at Segment as helping to be the connective tissue, right, to like connect to different spokes out there. Right. And being able to work off the data on a lake house, right, to help power that and put that forward. Right. The second piece I'll put in is, obviously there's the CX side of the house, but today where we see the biggest bang for your buck on agents is actually workforce optimization and operations, particularly on the marketing side of the house. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing across the board like 40, 56% reductions in like effort, 40 to 60% reductions in effort, right, on very simple marketing tasks. So marketing teams can focus on more heavier value, right? So like the creative QA process for Albertsons to launch a campaign from an advertiser partner into their media network used to take 4 hours and 10 minutes, right? That now takes a little bit more than 90. Right? That's allowed them to go from 4,000 campaigns a month to 10,000 campaigns a month using a combination of generative AI and agents, et cetera, right? And we see CDPs and Segment in particular providing a lot of the valuable data attributes to start driving some of the customization around that, driving some of the optimization of that, but also enabling marketing teams, right, to create more personalized journeys, more interactive journeys, and kind of speeding that process up. So again, I think of it as like, we're going to get to a truly agentic world in probably a couple of years, but the first wave of that is already happening today.
Yeah. Just one thing, which reminded me as you were talking through this thing, increasingly even the campaigns are becoming more agentic, more dynamic, the word, because, we all know users have certain affinity to certain channels. Some have affinity to email, some have affinity to SMS. In the traditional world, we'll run an email campaign, we'll run an SMS campaign, right? So what we see increasingly is like, hey, we will run a campaign and the agent will decide, whether it should be an email for a person. It's more going to be a dynamic campaign. So we could be getting emails for some people and SMS for some people based on their affinity of the channel, right? So rather than a kind of a omni-channel experience in a very dynamic way, right? So that's increasingly a powerful experience for conversion. Yeah, and click-through rates.
And I'll add that like the next dimension to that is the personalization on the channel linked to the context itself that's coming through, right? Right. And so, and this is where, again, we see agents operating on large amounts of data to be able to process action. So a clear example on this is like at Amazon, right? We knew that if you're on the website based on a series of patterns and behaviors, you're more likely to be in an exploratory mode. And so the recommendations we give you are more products that might create a serendipitous experience, right? Because you're exploring, you're trying to find new things, et cetera. When you're on the mobile app, you're typically very, very focused on conducting a transaction. So our recommendations need to be tailored to just getting the thing to the shopping cart and moving to the shopping cart as fast as possible, right? But now, and again, those are like somewhat fixed and finite, but now you're going to have agents that are going to be picking up context and intent signals in real time to be able to then hyper-personalize that journey one dimension further and say, in these instances, Srini should be met in SMS text and get direct to the point. This instance, in this context, Srini should actually be getting a more exploratory message associated with that. And those agents will start running A/B tests and A/B campaigns to see the incrementality in that lift real time, right? So it's kind of, we're moving to a point where like, it's not gonna be a marketing team that decides a campaign and run an A/B test in a fixed point of time. It's gonna be a bunch of agents doing that, telling you and saying, here's what actually worked, right? Cool. I guess we'll leave it for questions in a second, but if you had to kind of leave with a point of like advice for folks, what would you say?
Yeah, I think the two things that I will say. One is, yes, Gen AI is there, a lot of models are out there, a lot of things are there, but still data is the most important asset to drive all this work, right? So the more you can spend and make sure that you have the foundational data sets in your organization, and increasingly real time, right? That is really the most important thing, right? And the second thing is that it's a for example, when I talk about the clickstream journey that we talked about, it was not a small effort. Like it took us almost a year to get there, right? So stay patient, stay focused, because it is going to take step by step, because there's a whole bunch of data out there that you need to be really focused on to get to that level, right? Because that really accelerated a lot of our work. So that's where, still focus on the fundamentals, make sure that the data is there for you. So, and then maybe the last one, I guess, I accelerated one more. Always start with the business problem and work backwards, right? Because it's easy to say, hey, I have this technology, where can I apply? Because that's where you get caught into a lot of the problems, like, hey, what's the value, what's happening here? You see a lot of POCs, but not really production outcomes, right? So you want to really be focused on that, because that will tell you the solution and all the underlying data that you need to drive that work.
I'll kind of focus on that the complexity of the data challenge, right, is going to get harder and harder. And it's not as simple as just dumping the data into one place, right? Because I need to not only have data consolidated, but I need it unified and linked in a way together that I can actually orchestrate on that data. And the unification of that challenge and being able to understand that, right, is a non-trivial task. And I think that organizations have historically avoided a lot of that, like tying their clickstream and AppStream data together, right? It's hard, right? But that's where you need to do that. And you're going to be running analytics and analyses, right, on larger and larger data sets, right, for organizations, not just the digitally native firms, right? And so I think that's the capacity and muscle that the vast majority of enterprises need to start building, is like truly starting to think and operate in the way that a lot of digitally native organizations did, right? So to be able to operate that at scale. And again, I think that's a place where both Segment and Databricks help a lot.
Yeah, cool.
We'd like to open up to questions for you guys. What do you guys? Thanks, guys. Thank you all.
Thank you.